Bill Clinton, regarded as a saint amongst men, a faithful husband who has never done anything wrong in his entire life, and everyone agrees with this. Remembered as the leader of the 90s, his time in office was stable, lucrative, and most of all, peaceful. Right between the Cold War and the War on Terror, Clinton created a peaceful 90s, right? Wrong, idiot! The US was involved in a bunch of conflicts in the 90s. Why would you ever think it was peaceful? Because you say that in like every video? While the US never pulled out the big guns under Clinton, they weren't singing Kumbaya neither. Bill would still get his fill of kills. So today, we'll be talking about everybody's favorite YouTube history topic, war. But first, we have to start at the start of the end of the Cold War. America's rivalry with Russia had dominated foreign policy for decades. The goal of containing communism was pretty straightforward, but that was over. Clinton took office as America's first post-Cold War president, so he had to come up with new foreign and military policy. The whole world was feeling pretty chummy now that there wasn't a nuclear gun in their mouths 24/7. So international cooperation, specifically with the United Nations, was the policy of the day. Solving the world's problems as a big, happy family. What could possibly go wrong? Somalia. While today seen as the anarchy home of pirates and a constant civil war, in the 90s, that future wasn't so certain. The Somali Civil War began in 91, and things got real bad real quick. After overthrowing a dictator, warlords had torn apart the country, and a famine seemed imminent. So the United Nations got involved, trying to stop the famine, keep the peace, and even build a new government. But with constant shipment raids and assaults on workers, turns out that's not that easy. Who'd have thought? They called for military aid, which George H.W. Bush answered in his final weeks as president.
Well, Billy, you beat me fair and square. Guess I better pack my bags, say my goodbyes, and send 25,000 troops to a random African civil war that you now have to deal with. See you later, masturbator.
They began Operation Restore Hope, and considering the Civil War is still going on to this day, you can probably tell how successful they were. Bush assured the public that he would bring troops home before Clinton took office, and then just didn't do it. When Clinton took over, he saw the dismal state of the relief efforts and was anxious to get troops out. In June of 92, the situation took a nosedive when 24 Pakistani peacekeepers were attacked and killed by the forces of warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid. He had agreed to a UN resolution ending the violence, and then just didn't do it. Things heated up. Troops were now continually facing mines and bombings, with injuries and deaths mounting. Clinton continued to remove troops, and by the summer of 93, only 1,200 remained. He wanted this over ASAP, and even sent everyone's favorite former president, Jimmy Carter, to go negotiate. But his peanut farm charm wasn't enough. Finally, in October of 93, US forces launched Operation Gothic Serpent, a plan to catch Aidid. US soldiers were sent to capture him and his associates at a hotel meeting in the capital of Mogadishu. Rangers helicoptered in, entered the building, and captured his associates, but Aidid was not there. Despite this, the operation seemed to be a massive success. I mean, look, even the locals are gathered to celebrate. What's that, a firework? A Black Hawk helicopter was taken down, and then another. Troops rushed to secure the crash sites, but were under heavy fire. Hundreds of Somali fighters swarmed the streets, and troops only made it to the first crash site. 2 brave soldiers made it to the second site, but were overrun and killed, leaving the pilot to be captured. Troops held out in the city for 17 hours before an international force of around 100 vehicles managed to get them out. It was a disaster. The battle left 18 Americans dead and 84 wounded, the highest casualty count since Vietnam. 13 UN soldiers were either killed or injured, and an estimated 700 to 1,500 Somalis lay dead. News outlets showed videos of Somali crowds dragging American bodies through the streets. Days later, Clinton sent a relief force to remove all troops from Somalia. The UN would follow suit a year later. The hunt for Aidid was over, and the intervention failed. What came to be known as Black Hawk Down changed US policy going forward, making Clinton extremely hesitant to deploy ground forces. And it's likely the reason America didn't intervene in the Rwandan genocide. But the retreat would be one of the most important aspects of the fiasco. Terrorists like Osama bin Laden now believed US troops were fragile, and America would back down when deaths started to mount. And speaking of, Only a year after Clinton took office, terrorists attacked the World Trade Center. Yes, that's right, if I had a nickel. Though we will never forget 9/11, we often forget its 90s prequel, the World Trade Center bombing. On February 26, 1993, a truck bomb was detonated in the basement parking garage of the World Trade Center. The 1,500-pound bomb blew a 6-story hole in the parking garage, killing 6 and injuring over 1,000. It was the deadliest terror attack in the US, though that would later be covered up by larger attacks, literally. The plan was to destabilize the ground beneath the towers, knocking one into the other. Initially, Libya's dictator Muammar Gaddafi and our old pal Saddam Hussein were prime suspects, but they were quickly proven innocent when one of the terrorists returned to the rental agency that he had gotten the truck from to try to get his deposit back on the truck he had just used as a bomb. Obviously, he was immediately arrested and his co-conspirators captured. The attack shook the president, who decided to take terrorism far more seriously during his terms. Clinton promised to combat the rising threat of terrorism, telling the country in his State of the Union,
"But the terrorists represent the past, not the future."
Clinton passed new counter-terrorism legislation, blocked assets of known terrorist organizations, and increased security at airports. In particular, Clinton wanted to take down infamous terrorist leader Osama bin Laden. In '96, he created the Bin Laden Issue Station, a part of the CIA specifically dedicated to taking him out. The hunt ramped up after he bombed US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in '98. Clinton struck at bin Laden that same year, but the airstrike failed to kill him. Other planned strikes were turned down by Clinton, either because of shaky intelligence or civilian casualties. And besides, the threat of Al-Qaeda was seen as alarmist and not that serious anyways. Oopsie. In the years since 9/11, Clinton has been blamed for not doing enough to take down bin Laden. Yet he claims that during his presidency, people thought he was too obsessed with killing him. Regardless, he didn't kill bin Laden, which of course led to the war in Afghanistan and by proxy, the war in Iraq. Speaking of... But first, 3 big announcements for the price of 1. Rejected from your dream school? Well, good news. Enrollment in Boon U starts today with channel memberships and the official Patreon. If you want to support history on YouTube while also getting exclusive videos, a vote on the topics, and your name in the credits, all for as low as $1 for a limited time, check it out. Or come to class every Sunday on Twitch, where I'll be going over the history that happens every week, along with talks, reacts, games, friends, and more. And finally, visit campus on the official Boon U Discord. Check out the links in the description for more. Thank you for all the support, and I'll see you in class. You better be there. I take attendance. Clinton inherited another one of HW's wars. After the Gulf War, coalition forces created 2 no-fly zones in North and South Iraq to defend minority populations there. Throughout the 90s, US and British jets patrolled the sky, shooting down any aircraft that violated the zone, and sometimes their own. Believe it or not, but Iraq wasn't too happy with this arrangement, with Saddam flipping between respecting the no-fly zones and encouraging his men to shoot down the jets. Iraqi air defenses would constantly shoot at jets, to which they responded by bombing them. The US often had to keep Iraq in line over the decade. In '93, Iraqi intelligence attempted to assassinate Big Bush on his visit to Kuwait. In response, the US fired cruise missiles into Iraq. The next year, Saddam sent 64,000 troops to the Kuwait border, seemingly to invade again, because it would just go so much better the second time, I guess. The US sent its own troops to Kuwait, and he eventually backed down. In response to Saddam not cooperating with UN weapon inspections, Clinton ordered a 4-day bombing campaign, which just so happened to delay his impeachment proceedings. But I mean, come on, he just lost his best way of blowing off steam. What else was he supposed to do? The US and UK would fly hundreds of thousands of missions over Iraq, so basically for the rest of this video, just assume the US is enforcing the no-fly zone. And speaking of... Yugoslavia, a multi-ethnic nation in the Balkans. From that oxymoron alone, you could probably assume their stability. Trying to quickly explain how Yugoslavia works is like trying to explain how a Jeep engine works. It doesn't. In the early 90s, communist regimes were failing worldwide, and Yugoslavia was no different. The economy was crumbling, people hated the government, and all those ethnicities did what Balkan ethnicities always do: kill each other. The Yugoslav wars will get a video themselves one day when I feel like getting murdered by every Eastern Eastern European, but for today we're just gonna focus on the particularly bad area of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The country had declared independence in '92, and the fighting started almost immediately. The local Muslim Bosniaks were subject to attacks by local Bosnian Serbs and other groups, with forced expulsions and ethnic cleansings of areas. Again, the UN tried to hand out aid and create a no-fly zone, and again, they couldn't enforce it. So the NATO alliance stepped up in '93 to enforce it, with Operation Deny Flight. They were really on the nose with operation names back in the day. In February of '94, US jets shot down 4 aircraft violating the zone, NATO's first ever combat operation. NATO forces attacked ground targets at the UN's request and received heavy anti-aircraft fire, so much that in June of '95, an American F-16 was shot down. The pilot, Scott O'Grady, managed to avoid Serb forces for nearly a week, contact friendly forces, and have a team of Marines fly behind enemy lines to get him out. Unlike Black Hawk Down, this was a huge propaganda victory, and O'Grady became a war hero. But the war itself was getting worse. After Serb forces bombed a civilian marketplace and overran a UN safe zone, massacring 7,000 Bosniak men of all ages, Clinton and NATO got pissed. They authorized a massive air campaign against Bosnian Serb forces. Clashes got more fierce, with a Navy missile strike being launched and a French jet being shot down. This, along with a new Bosniak offensive, forced the Serbs to negotiate, and Clinton knew just the place to do it. One of the most prestigious American cities, a symbol of freedom, and world-renowned for its beauty and peacekeeping efforts. Dayton, Ohio. The Dayton Accords would end the war in '95, and a 60,000-strong peacekeeping force would be deployed to enforce it. Clinton and his allies had managed to end the war, all without need for an invasion. Oh, and speaking of, in 1990, the Caribbean nation of Haiti held its first ever free election, with Jean-Bertrand Aristide being elected president, and then being overthrown in a military coup the next year. America, as in the entire 2 continents, imposed sanctions to try to force the country back to democracy. The new regime was brutal, torturing, violating, and killing over 5,000 Aristide supporters over the course of their reign. The ensuing refugee crisis was something Clinton criticized during his campaign, and yet again, another one of Bush's problems he now had to deal with. Clinton increased economic and political pressure on Haiti, and it seemed to be working, as the leaders agreed to give back power, and then just didn't do it. When a US ship arrived in Haiti to prepare for the handover, they were met with an angry mob, with Mogadishu having happened only a week before they decided to play it safe and pull back. Yeah, the timeline's a little muddled since everything's kind of starting and ending at the same time, so just assume everything you've heard so far is also happening in the background. The UN implemented a blockade and for the first time ever authorized use of force to restore democracy. The US began to plan Operation Uphold Democracy, the invasion of Haiti involving 25,000 troops, 2 aircraft carriers, and large-scale air support, along with troops from multiple Caribbean countries. Clinton was not holding back after Somalia. The invasion was planned for September 19th of '94, and only one man could stop it. Jimmy Carter, he's back, baby! Carter had been trying to help Haiti for years through the Carter Center, even overseeing their election in 1990. So only 2 days before the invasion, Clinton sent Carter, Senator Sam Nunn, and future Secretary of State Colin Powell to negotiate. This is my Avengers. Negotiations at first went nowhere, since Haitian leaders didn't think they were going to be invaded. Why not? Well, because the leader of one of those death squads I mentioned earlier was actually on the CIA's payroll, because of course he was. Isn't that delightful? They essentially didn't believe Carter until the day of the invasion, when he told them that troops were literally on boats coming there right now. In a last-ditch effort, Powell and Carter appealed to the dictator's sense of duty, telling him it wouldn't be very honorable to just let all his men be gunned down by paratroopers in a few hours. And incredibly, just before boats hit the shore, they agreed to hand over power. The invasion force turned into a peacekeeping force. They had done it, which, thank God, because what was Carter's plan if it didn't work? Like, imagine they said no, the invasion starts, and now they just have a general, a senator, and a former president as hostages. They could have just killed them the second boots hit the ground. But thankfully they didn't, and Jimmy Carter saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives, which just goes to show that good people don't make good presidents. Clinton had redeemed himself. After the failure in Somalia, he brought back democracy to Haiti, and even stopped a genocide in the Balkans. Well, speaking of... So after 4 nations split from them, Serbia still didn't want to admit that Yugoslavia was over. So they continued cosplaying as Yugoslavia with themselves, Montenegro, who didn't really want to be there, and their own region of Kosovo, who really didn't want to be there. Or Serbia. Not even Serbia wants to be its friend. Kosovo was mostly made up of Muslim Albanians, but it was the seat of the Serbian Orthodox Church, so like that time you forgot your girlfriend's birthday, they weren't about to let it go. Tensions between the two sides flared, and by 98 there was a full-on armed uprising. Atrocities on both sides created refugees and attention. Soon, a group of Western powers and Russia demanded a ceasefire and withdrawal of Serbian troops. Yugoslav President Milosevic agreed, and then just didn't do it. When the ceasefire failed, Yugoslavia went back to its tried and true method of ethnic cleansing. Third time's the charm, I guess. The UN did what they were best at, telling them they were being naughty boys and they would get no more cool guns to play with. Yet they refused to authorize force. But since the UN had fumbled basically everything they'd been a part of up to this point, Clinton was pretty sick of their shit. And he was especially tired of Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic, to which he famously said, "Slobodan my nuts, I'm doing it anyways." In March of 99, NATO began airstrikes into Yugoslavia, its first ever attacks on a sovereign nation. And since there was no UN mandate, it was technically illegal under international law. Then again, so is literally ethnic cleansing, so they didn't have much of a leg to stand on. In response, Yugoslav forces pushed out all ethnic Albanians, creating hundreds of thousands of refugees. The bombing campaign lasted 11 weeks and even extended to the Serbian capital of Belgrade. Not only military targets were hit, but infrastructure like bridges and railways, and a broadcast station that killed journalists. NATO also bombed the Chinese embassy, another epic CIA moment, along with a convoy of Albanian refugees by accident. Between 12 and 15,000 people would be killed during the bombings. In June, the two sides agreed to a peace deal. It allowed for the return of 1.5 million refugees, along with troop removals and UN peacekeeping deployments. Despite still being claimed by Serbia and only semi-recognized, Kosovo was basically free and officially declared independence in 2008. The people of Kosovo were so thankful they gave old Billy Boy his own statue right in the capital. By the end of the war, it was 1999, and Clinton's second term was coming to an end. While internal affairs were stable, except for that affair, international affairs were a mixed bag. Clinton had helped save democracy, win nations their freedom, and even stop 2 ethnic cleansings. Yet, he ignored other genocides, oversaw the biggest military failure in decades, and didn't kill bin Laden. There was a lot to be proud of and a lot to regret, but I'm sure his biggest foreign policy relief was not being president a few months later. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.